John. This is one of my presents to my son and his girlfriend.
Oh,
It
did you hit
says,
that light there,
it's
sir?
a Hallmark keepsake ornament.
Okay.
And then it says Christmas.
All right, everybody.
Their first Christmas, I think.
And stream live. 10 seconds. We're live. It's live. Sorry. Forgive me, whatever land you live in. This thing's the worst thing, and I hate technology, and it's all worthless. How's that for a positive spin on life from Mr. Positive? Hello, TCI family. Thank you. I don't know what's going to happen because I'm trying to do something on one computer that's I can't find in another computer. I'm not going to bore you with it. The message last week ended on a note, everybody, and that note was silence, which leads us into this week. Silence. And so often when I preach out of the Bible. That's because I was raised as a Christian. But halfway through my life, I became what they refer to as, or I refer to call myself, a Christian Buddhist. Buddhism is not a religion. Christianity is, but Buddhism is not. Buddhism is a philosophy. The Buddha never said I'm a god. He said I'm actually a man. And so I'm going to be teaching today from the Buddha. And we're going to learn from this young prince who was the heir of the kingdom and walked away from it all. Most people don't know that Buddha was a real dude, and he was here about 500 years before Christ. And this guy was not named Buddha, and he wasn't fat, and he wasn't bald. Buddha was full head of hair, very skinny, very thin, and he was a prince. His father was the king, and he had been kept in the castle. His father had never allowed him to leave the castle. So his whole life, it was his mother and him, his father, the king, and all of the servants. Never had he ever, if he needed food, I'm hungry. A person literally put food into his mouth. I'm thirsty. Another cupbearer brought him food. I'm cold. The clothier bearer put a robe on. He did not, he had no suffering. There's no pain, right? Everything's perfect. So one day, the Buddha, Gautama was his name, decided to leave the castle. You know, he was a younger man. He was in his teenage years, some say he was in his 20s. I think the 20s is more realistic because he was married and he had a child. And he went outside the kingdom. And when he went out against the king's wishes, he saw old people dying in the streets. Lame people with no leg hopping on a stick, and he started to weep. He never knew there was such suffering in the world, because in his world he had no suffering. There was no suffering. His father kept him from the suffering, and so it broke his heart, and it's what started this whole journey. Now I normally get some hate mail out in this world from emails saying you shouldn't have said that, but I don't care. I speak my mind. I don't agree with Gautama. I always pronounce his name wrong. The Buddha. I disagree with what the Buddha did. The Buddha was married and had a child. You don't walk away from your wife and your child and say it's because of a spiritual thing. I've had the pleasure of having 3 fathers and 3 different families in my life. My birth, my adopted, and my spiritual father. All died except for my adopted dad. Hello, Dad. I love you. And what's interesting is one of my families, my birth family, they're one of those people that, like the Buddha, they believe you should head off to the mountains and live up there until Jesus speaks to you and pretend like the rest of the world doesn't exist. God will provide your bills and that kind of stuff. So I don't believe in that part. But let me tell you what he did discover. He discovered the concept of becoming enlightened for himself. And so I'm going to read to you a little story real quick, and we're going to talk about it. Buddha, manifesting silence. And I hope they can see me, because now I don't know if you can see me or not out there. So if you can't, I apologize, and we'll just delete this and I'll redo one later. When Buddha got enlightened on the full moon day in the month of May, he kept silent for a whole week. He did not say a word. Mythology says that all the angels in the heaven got frightened and said, once in a million someone blossoms to fully like the Buddha. Now he is silent, is not saying a word. It is said all the angels approached Buddha and asked him to say something. Please speak something. And Buddha said, those who know, they know, even without my saying. And those who do not know, they will not know my words. Any description of life to a blind man is of no use. One who has not tasted the ambrosia of existence of life. No point in talking to them about it. So I am silent, he said. How can you convey something so intimate, something so personal? Words cannot. And many scriptures in the past have declared, words end where truth begins. The argument was very good, but the angel said, yes, we agree when what you say is right, but Buddha, consider those who are on the borderline. There are a few who are in between, who are neither fully enlightened nor totally ignorant. For them, a few words will give a push. For their sake, please speak something, say something, and every word of yours will create that silence. For the purpose of words are to create silence. Listen to that. The purpose of words are to create silence. If words create more noise, then they have not reached their goal. And Buddha's words would definitely create the silence, because Buddha is the manifestation of silence. Silence, and this is the key, silence is the source of life and is the cure for diseases. You might have noticed when people are angry, they keep silent. Either they shout a lot, and after shouting, they become silent. Or when you are sad, you say, leave me alone. My mom died. You keep a long face and you keep silent. You can easily make out whether someone is in the right mind or not. If they are very silent, then you know something's wrong. If you are sad, you go and become silent. People put their head down and they keep silent. And if you are ashamed, you become silent. And if you are wise, you become silent. And when you are confronted with ignorance and useless questions, you become silent.
Silent is golden.
What can you do? When Jesus was asked to prove himself, are you the Son of God? I quote, he kept silent. That was the wisest thing the Christ could do. When you are demanded for proof of something which is beyond proof, the remedy is silence. You're telling someone you have a pain in your leg and they ask you, come on, prove it to me. How do I believe you? How can you prove your pain? How can you prove the pain that's hurting you in your heart? How can you prove the pain of your mom dying?
Silence.
It's a good place to start. Space and silence are synonymous. Joy, fulfillment brings the silence. Desire brings noise. Silence is the cure. Because in silence, you come back to the source, the creative source, the creative joy that I talk about all the time. That creative substance, by the way, I'm getting off the path, that permeates and penetrates every substance in the universe. The Big Bang, that's the source that we're talking about. That's why when someone is sad, they become silent and they get rid of their sadness, they come out. They're supposed to come out with joy or some calmness at least. Buddha was the manifestation of silence. His silence had come from saturation, not from lack. Lack creates complaints and noise. Saturation brings silence. Look at the noise in your mind. What is it about? And I want you guys to think about that for a second. What is the noise in your mind? Don't say it. I just want you to think about that. More money, more fame, more recognition, more fulfillment, more relationships. The noise is about something. Silence is about nothing. You guys see what I'm starting to say here? Silence is the basis. Noise is the surface. So the basis is silence. Noise is the surface, is the outer. Noise indicates lack, need, want. Buddha's life was not about lack. If you remember, I told you he was the child of the king. He was the man to inherit the whole kingdom. And he walked away from it all because he was enlightened. Last week, I tried to explain. Let me go back to the video thing so I can see, people see. I was trying to explain to everyone what I went through. And I was frustrated almost because I couldn't really I couldn't explain it to you. I was trying. And since then, I've had a lot of people my bishops, I've been speaking to them and talking to them about it. And it's interesting. The more I've said the story, the more I realized I was searching. I needed to go back, and I went to this website I use, and I knew that I could find this article, this conversation with the Buddha. And so I found it, and he's right. How do you explain that? I can't. That's my moment on that river at the Big Four Ice Caves in that moment when I feel that at that time I was enlightened what I was looking for. And that's for me and my own. And that's why I said it last week. We're going to talk a little more about silence. You all need to go have your mountain experience. You need to get out there into that silent place and experience. What's that song? Silent night, holy night. It's holy. Silence is holy. We sing about it. We as society have tapped into that secret and said, oh, wait a second. In silence, the creator creates things. And what I mean by the creator is you and me. In silence, Nikola Tesla did what? He changed the world. He didn't run out there and no. He was sitting in his shop. He was in his head. He was silent. Read his notes. He talked a lot about that. His meditation process would literally blank everything out. You could take the textbook from Buddha's, teachings of meditation and really relate it to a creator who then cleared his head. I do the same thing with my sermons. I learned from the greats. They did the same thing. They sit down. They have no agenda. Tonight's message. What are we going to do? I don't know. What is God going to do? I have no clue. Let's see what the great creator wants. And they'll silence their mind, silence the noise, silence the rubbish. And the yak. I love the part in there, by the way, that talked about how do you talk to the person who's ignorant? The screaming guy. Yeah! Yeah! You done? You finished? Now, do you talk to that person? I don't waste a second with that. Because they're in their pain for whatever that might be. You're not going fast enough. Take that, and flips you off. Oh, they're still in pain. They're still suffering. Guess what? I suffer a lot still on the highway too. I'm usually that guy. What do you mean you cut me off? I'll show you. I'll teach you. Wait a second. Why am I in pain? What happened to me today? Why am I suffering? It ain't the car that cut me off. Because if it is, that car owns Jonathan Brown.
That's right.
And nobody owns Jonathan Brown except for temporary moments where I allow them to. Where I allow my thoughts and my words to no longer be silent, but to be buzzing, irritating, aggravating, angry building. But you don't know. You don't want to get me pissed off. Well, you can go talk to. Well, no, you can't talk to those people because they're no longer around. You can go talk to people who knew the people that got me angry, and you can find out what the old beast did to those people. That beast had to be silenced. I had to silence it. I had to silence who I was. And once I can find that peace, and someone said, "Are you enlightened?" No. But did I become enlightened at that moment, for that time, for what I was searching? Absolutely. And it was the most magical moment I will never forget. I could swear that you could hear my mother's voice, Papa Chuck's voice, my dad Vive. It was angelic. But that's for me, not for you. That was for my spiritual enlightenment, not yours. What I hope that it would do is just spark that moment with you to become enlightened, to want to become enlightened. And being enlightened does not mean, I have arrived. If it was about being bald, fat bellies, and humming, I'd have been the Buddha a long time ago. Okay? But I'm not, because I'm still a human like you and me. And I wonder, was the Buddha always the Buddha? Just like with Christ, the Christ. Was he always that immaculate? with all the little 6,000 kids on the hill screaming and the 4,000 wives and then the 5,000 men and everyone's screaming about food and this. You telling me that not once he didn't say, "Hey, kid, knock it off"? I don't know. I don't. To say I do would be a lie. We don't. But I can tell you this. If they are like that, though, I'm not like them because I'm still human. But here's what I want you to catch on this whole message today. It's that silence that needs to grab you and make you think for a second. Why am I yelling at the person that's talking on the radio or the television? Why am I yelling at the car next to me when there's absolutely nothing going to change? They're not listening to you. They're driving 70 miles an hour. They don't care about you. I can't even tell you what the car was that cut me off today. I don't know. I really don't. I forgot them. But for 10 seconds, that car owned me. And it took me 10 seconds. And boy, I get mad when it takes more than 10 seconds for me to be unowned. Who owns you? Who owns you? This is a good question because we all are owned. I know every person in this house, and I've listened to every person in this house talk for the last couple of years. Some of you are newer. And I can tell you right now, in your talks with me, you are owned by other people for periods of times. Sometimes it's our jobs, it's our parents, it's an uncle, it's a friend, it's a house boss or whatever. Try to become silent. See what happens. See if you can tap into silent night. Because that is the magic of Christmas. It's the silence. And so I'm going to wrap it up by saying this week, as we go into the Christmas week, which is next week, and we will be holding Christmas church here Thursday night. My bride and me will be heading off. She's got me a special location, undisclosed, where nobody can know, I guess. Apparently not even me. And no phones are allowed. She said no videotapes. That's kind of scary. I wonder what that's about. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But here's the thing, is that next week we're going to wrap up the Silent Night story that we started last week. We got into this week, and we're going to finish next week. But this week, I want everyone to think on this. How can I shut up? Let's just get blunt. Shut up. Shut your mind up. Shut your thoughts up. I got desires. I have needs. Again, you're talking, which is, again, noise, which is junk. Quiet yourself. You do have needs. Start with your peace. Own yourself again. Own yourself each day. Because every day, somebody owns me for a second or two. It used to be for days. When my wife, I'm working on this, honey. When she first met me, boy, she'd be like, get me in riled up. And I'd be like, I'm going to drive now and leave me alone. 20 minutes later, I'm not done driving. So far, 20 minutes she owned me. That's right. She did. She owned me. I let her own me because I allowed whatever it was in that conversation today. And then I was just like mad at myself because I allowed a person to own me. And all we were doing was having a conversation. You know what that does to your blood pressure? Science proves it makes you live less life. Well, I don't care. Well, you'll care when you have a stroke and you're a half invalid and you don't have anybody to care for you. You're going to go, I wish I would have cared back then. It's too late then. But right now, you guys, as we go into Christmas, think about this whole season and the silent moments in your mind. Quiet your minds and find out how you can take back the creative power, which is silence. I love you guys. Live positive.
Positive, man.
And then we'll all upload.